Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tiina Loite. Tiina Loite has over 3 decades of experience as a photo editor at the New York Times. Initially, she focused on becoming the photo assignment editor. However, her path took a creative turn in 1992 when she joined the newly launched Sunday Style section, a position she held for decades. Tiina then continued to shape the visual storytelling at the Times in the redesigned food section. After leaving the New York Times in 2017, she was the photo editor of the acclaimed book, Bill Cunningham, On the Street, 5 Decades of Iconic Photography. Today, Tiina Loite joins us on the Crit House to discuss her myFIVE images from Richard Avedon, Cindy Sherman, Edward Keating, Ron Galella, and Tom Howard.
Tiina Loite, boy, what a pleasure to have you on the program. It's a long time coming, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you were a photo editor for the New York Times for quite some time, and on this program, generally what we have done is we talk to photographers about the images that have affected them, and you come to it from a different perspective. You work in the world of photography, but not necessarily as a photographer. And I'm interested to hear about your view on images, and because it's not coming from the same place that we have with a lot of the people that we've talked to in the past.
It may not be really all that different. I mean, the way I looked at your invitation to talk about myFIVE is that these are photographs that have stuck in my head. These are photographs that have made me excited and wild and curious and wanting to know more about them. And all of the 5 photos, for the most part, are things I saw very early in my career, and in one case, in my childhood. The latest would be a photo that we've included from the 90s, but these are all photos that have stuck with me, that have made me want to learn more about how they came to be.
Well, so they had the little intro at the beginning for you as what you have done historically in your career as a photo editor, but like, how do you talk about yourself? You're retired now from that job as a photo editor, but how do you encapsulate what you did and who you were and who you are?
Well, it's a bit of a, rote explanation, which is, describing what a photo editor does at a newspaper. I spent a lot of time in the style section. I talked to people about what that was slightly different photo editing. A lot of what we did for the style section, we created situations. There was studio photography. We were able to, there were portraits, there were things that could be styled, there were fashion shoots. So it was a little bit different than working in the news department. I also and I did work on several news sections.
Yeah.
I did the city section, which was a Sunday section that was shorter, more feature-oriented stories on New York City. And then I ended up in the food section too, which was wonderful. I don't cook at all, but I like to read recipes, and food photography is endlessly interesting.
Well, I don't cook at all either, but I still have a palate where I really enjoy eating. So
I think I was the only one on the food section who didn't cook.
Well, it's good to have
Seriously, not one bit. Yeah.
But you are also you published this book that I have you generously provided to me, this the Bill Cunningham book that you were the editor and writer for.
Well, I wrote the
Much of
preface for it. When I was leaving the Times, I took a buyout. I was approached by the book side of the Times. Bill had died in 2016, and this was 2017, and the Times wanted to do a Bill Cunningham book. And I was asked to be the photo editor for that book, which basically meant I had to go through a lot of Bill's pictures. Bill Cunningham shot a lot of film.
Yes.
And Bill Cunningham shot film longer than everybody else at the New York Times. There was a lot to look at. an enormous, I could have spent, it took 2 years to put the book together, but honestly, I really needed 10. I mean,
Well,
it's just that much material to go through.
well, there's that much material, but there's also, I mean, so a lot of like photo books will have like a photograph on a page. But
Mhm.
so, I mean, there are a lot of like, photographs in this book, and that's just uh
And Bill's columns had, possibly 50 pictures in them. I mean, Bill was highlighting trends. Here's everybody wearing yellow. All right. And here are men walking around without socks and shoes. I mean, there was a theme to it all. And he had a lot of pictures. Some of them were postage stamp size. But when you looked at them, in many cases, they were beautiful pictures on their own. So we still honored Bill's interest in juxtaposition and putting certain things next to other things in picture wise, but we wanted to let the pictures breathe a little. I said we wanted to see the trees for the forest with his work and give people the opportunity to see a bigger representation, a larger representation of some of the pictures Bill has taken.
well, it is it's not only an interesting thing from a photographic standpoint, but and I haven't finished it yet because
Mhm.
this is it's quite the it's
There's a
cool.
lot to look at. There's a
It's a
lot.
lot to look at, but it's also, I mean, there's this, it is historical in nature in a way that's, I mean, I'm not one who has a lot of photo books, but it was, it allowed me to understand how Bill and photography, had a representation of our time through his time at the Times.
And he was a walking encyclopedia on fashion history. Bill loved to run around saying, I'm not a real photographer. I'm not a real photographer. And he described himself very well as a columnist who writes with pictures.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what he was.
Mhm. Yeah. It's a good description. And let me just like for those who are watching, it's an amazing book. Again, not only from a like a photographic standpoint, but it's a trip down memory lane in terms of the things that he was shooting and talking about. But it's also just it's a great piece of history for all the things that you did. So I give you great credit for this amazing book. Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So 5 images that
Yes.
you have chosen, and I have to say, you sent these a while back, and so we've been going back and forth a little bit. I'm very excited about the discussion because, I mean, except for one, the photographers were not represented in previous episodes of this, and this is also a trip down through history in
Mhm.
some ways. So let's take a look. Let's start out with talking about your 5 images, and we start with Richard Avedon and this
Fabulous.
iconic image, fantastic.
Which again, I think I was in my early 20s, and for me, this represented idea with a capital I. He's photographing, a model in a gown, but with elephants. And I never asked why, that never occurred to me. It's of course you would do something like it's the idea jumped out at me. And it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And then when I even did a little reading about it, about how it came to be, he was working for Harper's Bazaar at the time and was sent to Paris to do to shoot full fashion with the editor of Harper's Bazaar. I think he somehow walked by. It was a movie set there was a movie being done at a circus in Paris, and it just came to him. And Dovima was a top model at the time. And the other part of this, which is interesting, is that the dress that she is wearing, which is a Christian Dior dress, was designed by the then 19-year-old Yves Saint Laurent,
Mhm.
was working with Dior as an assistant designer. And it was probably, I think it was the first gown that the line produced that was designed by Yves Saint Laurent. 2 years after this photograph was taken, Christian Dior died, and the then 21-year-old Yves Saint Laurent succeeded him as head designer at the House of Dior.
Oh, lot of iconic names associated with that. That's
Yes,
impressive. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But it's a stunning picture. I can look at it for hours at a time. It's beautiful. I give Dovima credit for doing this too. Let's think about the picture from her point of view too. They asked her to stand with these giant animals.
Yep.
You can see chains, right, on each one of the elephant's legs, but it's just such a wonderful, rich, high-calorie, glamorous photo. He shot it on 8 by 10. Yeah, it's 1955. Yeah, I have to look at my notes too, because I'm an old lady and I forget things. Um, he shot it on a movie set. He shot it with an 8 by 10 camera, and it's just stunning. And I had never forgotten it. And again, it's all about having a really good idea. That
Well,
taught me a lot.
that's part of it, but it's also like just the little parts of it, you know. So I mean, you talked about the chains, but all just the gesture of her hand, so gentle on the trunk
On the
of the
trunk. Yes.
beautiful.
I
Just love
mean, really ask yourself, would you do this if you were asked to do this and stand with these elephants and put your hand on an elephant's trunk?
yeah.
It's a remarkable photograph. I've never forgotten it.
Let's go to your second photographer, and that's Ron Galella.
I love this picture.
Yes.
I love, love, love. This picture to me is just one of the most beautiful examples of hunter and prey. And, Ron Galella was your classic paparazzi. That's probably an anachronistic term right now, but I think we all know the story of how he stalked her and wouldn't leave her alone. And she took him to court 2 times, and she was given not an order of protection, but anyway, he was told to keep at least 25 or 50 feet away from her. He was in a cab when he shot this photograph, following her on Madison Avenue, and his cab driver honked, and she turned to look, and Galella had his camera up in front of his face, so she probably did not recognize him right away. He calls this picture my Mona Lisa. There is, just the faintest little smile on her face, possibly, but there's also a bit of, he claims she did not recognize him because he had the camera in front of his face. I think that's debatable. But to capture her, I mean, it's such a gazelle-like moment. And he calls the picture Windblown Jackie. It's to me, it's just an absolute stunning, stunning photograph. Even if you don't know the history of these two people, and they really were hunter and prey,
Yeah.
I think that comes through in this photograph. This is a caught you moment. She was responding to the honk. She turned, but everything is so beautiful, even just the way she's holding her glasses with her right hand, the stride, everything about this picture. The waist is turned a little bit. There are naysayers out there, certainly, who would say she knew, and she knew exactly how to pose and how to look. Again, this is all debatable, and I'm not going to get into that. The way the wind is blowing in her hair, and you can still look at her face. You can still see her face, and you can still see her eyes.
Yeah. Your third image with Cindy Sherman.
Yes, I love film stills. I've always loved film stills. This was a magnificent project. I'm not the first one to say that. This was an unbelievable. It took her many years to do this. This was in the late 70s, I think. She started in 1977. She did all these wonderful takeoffs on these old film stills where you had this woman who was perhaps a damsel in distress. Perhaps she just killed somebody. There were so many things to read into them. She didn't name these pictures either. They were all called untitled film stills number, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
which I think was brilliant on her part too, because you can make up whatever movie you want for each of those images. This one's well known. This is the one I first saw. And I said, "Oh my God, I love this." It was exciting. And just following her career, I mean, she's in all of these pictures.
Yes.
And there's a lot of work that goes into each one of these pictures. And again, let's go back to idea with a capital I. The fact that she even conceived of doing this project is, to do a riff and or to honor those old strange films and film stills where acting styles were different, black and white photography was different, and melodramatic stories. I it's a wonderful series, and I do like this one. I mean, she looks like she's looking at something specific. But again, there's about 10 different scenarios you can come up with, and that's what I think Cindy Sherman had in mind. There was an actual film still that I wanted to show, which affected me greatly from the moment I saw it.
Yes.
And I saw this, or at least parts of this movie at a ridiculously young age, so it stuck with me. I don't know if this was a documentary on Bergman that was on television. I was very young, and it was Channel 13, which people in New York know as the PBS station. But that scene came on the television, and I was completely transfixed. I was like, "What's going on there? What what's happening?" But I couldn't take my eyes off it. And when I was older and was seriously interested in film, specifically in Bergman, um, that's still I stared at forever. Gunnar Fisher was asked about that scene because it's shot on a beach, and it seems like both actors have the sun on their face. It's cross lit.
Mm.
And his answer was, "Look, if you can believe there's a knight playing chess with death on a beach, you can believe there are two suns." It's a beautiful photo. It's an absolutely beautiful film still.
So number four, we go in a different direction with what I think is, I mean, the last image is pretty impressive to talk about, but these images from Edward Keating, Eddie, I think you call him.
Yes.
Tell us about this work.
I worked with Ed when I was when we started the section that was at first called Styles of the Times. It was a new standalone Sunday style section. And all of us who were working on it, it was a young team. We were all in our early 30s, mid 30s. That was young at the times. And we were going in many different directions in terms of design, photography, and writing. And we had a column called Vows. The Times had always had wedding announcements, which was a very, very popular feature in the Times.
Yep.
And we were going to we were going to feature one wedding aside from all the announcements. We were going to feature one wedding a week, and a writer went to the wedding and talked to people. But we wanted the photography to not be, the formulaic kind of wedding photography that we're used to seeing, or the kind of wedding photography you would get from someone you hire to photograph your wedding.
Traditional photography.
So yes, so we had we had a photographer go to these weddings, and the photographer was working for the New York Times, not for the couple. Eddie Keating had a different point of view. Eddie went into this, he dove into this, even though he told me in the beginning, I tried to do, all I ever thought about was how I hope I can make a living as a photographer and not have to do weddings. I don't want to have to do weddings to make a living. And there he was, and
Making
he
his living.
loved it. And this is one of the early pictures I just don't remember. This might have been the first picture. Maybe, I think it probably wasn't, but this is classic Eddie point of view. Every week, I think there were people who turned to that section just to see what kind of a photo we were running. The story had two photos, one large photo and one much smaller photo. And that was what we were locked into. We had, something had to be the main photo, something had to be able to run small. But I love this picture. This is classic Eddie. And it was and many times, we tangled, because we only had those 2 pictures to run, and Eddie would, there were maybe 20 rolls of film, and sometimes we were right on point with each other about exactly what we thought would be the 2. Sometimes we tangled a little bit over this, but honestly, I will always remember Eddie's vows pictures. It's a fond memory for me, and sometimes, we had readers who said, "We don't like these pictures, why can't you do just the bride and groom doing this and that?" But we held firm.
All right, so we go from weddings to your final image, which goes to a different point in the life cycle. And let me just say for folks out there before I turn to it, there are those that are disturbed by the image. So I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it is hard to see. This is from Tom Howard from a long time ago. And why don't you tell us a story?
1928, yeah.
Yeah, tell us about this amazing image.
And you have actually the cover of the Daily News, which is that's part of the story here. This was from 1928, and this was a famous murder trial at the time of a woman named Ruth Snyder, who was accused of killing her husband. And she was going to be electrocuted at Sing Sing prison in Ossining. The editor of the Daily News at the time wanted to get a picture of this. And all of his New York photographers were known to people up at the prison.
And just be clear, it was not allowed.
Correct.
Take
It was
a
not allowed.
camera in there.
Getting a camera in there was not allowed.
Yeah.
He hired a photographer who was from Chicago, and they rigged him up with, and remember, this is 1928 we're talking about. So they rigged him up with a camera that was strapped to his ankle with a cord that ran up. He put a hole in his pocket with a release. And this is also before slow film was developed. And he got the shot.
And he had one shot.
He had one shot.
He had one shot.
One shot. They cropped it and made it fit on the cover, and they ran it. Yeah, they cropped it out of that. And one of the reasons I want, yes, I found this harrowing when I first saw this picture. With the headline over it. The headline's pretty harrowing too. The Daily News was also a newspaper where I think you had, mob rub-outs, pictures of mob rub-outs and things that weren't necessarily easy to see. But when, in present day, whenever with the Times or the Washington Post or some other news organization runs a particularly gruesome photo or a harrowing photo, there's always some sort of debate about whether we should show these images or not. And many people eloquently make a case for why we should, and someone will eloquently make a case for why we shouldn't. But I think most people think that there are things that do need to be seen and people need to understand it. Again, I repeat, this is 1928.
Yes.
When this was shown. The fact that they did it and the story behind it about, sneaking, getting an out-of-town photographer, rigging him up with a camera around his ankle, and he raced back to the Daily News headquarters in Manhattan with the film, and they ran it. It, obviously is a harrowing image, but the whole story behind it, the fact that this was done, and this again was big on the cover of the Daily News. This stuck with me for a long time. Everything about it.
Yeah, and so just for our viewers to be clear, this was while the electricity was surging through her.
Yes. Yes.
This was a long exposure while the
Yes.
act was taking place.
And of course, I had to think a little bit about whether I wanted to include this in the myFIVE, but to be quite honest, it is an image that stuck with me. The story is rather incredible. The fact that it was published the way it did with the giant word "dead" over it is historically important. His camera, I believe Tom Howard's camera is in the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I think the newspaper donated it to the museum some time ago. Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know that this happened.
So Tiina, again, I want to highlight this book. Just I'm looking forward to going through the rest of it. Just really well done.
It's a history of New York through fashion, or it's a history of fashion through through as it was seen. Because Bill stood on the corner of 57th and 5th for about 50 years. Obviously, he went to other places too and went to Paris, but that was his perch.
Yeah, I saw you wrote about that, and I was like, I don't know New York that well. I haven't been that many times, but now I'm gonna have to go down there and see what where he shot. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
It
And
was the
this is a
best.
wonderful series. Thank you. Thank you very much for starting it.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a great education for me. And it has opened my eyes to photography in ways that I don't think I would have had in front of me either. And by the way, not to keep beating a dead horse, but I get that from your book. I mean, I say that seriously. What reading your book made me look at photography differently than I had before that I had read it. So anyway, thanks for
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching The Crit House.